Alright, this is going to be a relatively unscripted video. I've got a script on the right here that has a bunch of points lined out that I want to talk about, but otherwise this is basically going to be a bit directionless, a little bit of a takedown of Corpse Party, especially the final two chapters, because the final two chapters are two of the stupidest things I've played in quite some time. Oh my god. The game is strange like that. It is really quite strange. But nevertheless, I'm obviously going to have to spoil the entire saga from beginning to end. So that's Corpse Party, Book of Shadows, and Blood Drive. I'm just going to have that Corpse Party logo in the background. So, I finished Corpse Party Blood Drive last night. I was surprised at how relatively short it was. There's a lot of very straightforward paths in Blood Drive, honestly. I was using a walkthrough. Like, first and foremost, I had enough at that point, and I'm just like, send me to the right position at exactly the right time. But frankly, I didn't even really need the walkthrough, because after, like, Chapter 4... the game has practically no, like, wandering puzzles in it, but, well, I'll get on to the other two puzzles. So, chapters 5 through 8 are very, very straightforward chapters, to the point where you could probably combine, like, 6 and 7 into, like, one chapter and then stick that on the end of chapter 5 or something, because, like, the ending screen for Blood Drive makes it appear just how obvious this is, because there are several chapters in the second half of the game that only have one ending. There's no interesting ways to die or anything like that. It's literally just nothing. Like, you can't do anything. You just have to go on through, and I don't think game overs actually count for an alternate ending, so if there is a way to die in those chapters, you probably won't get an ending for it, which is extremely disappointing, I must say. So, I don't really have that much to say about everything except the last two chapters, though, because as much as those chapters have some weird plot elements getting into it and all that, and I'll get onto those after I get through the gameplay, it's just a little bit notable that they are relatively straightforward and don't really branch off that much, which is kind of a shame, because you would think with this being the end of the, the Heavenly Host trilogy, you think they'd do something interesting, like they try and make room for another spin-off or something, but they don't do it for some reason. I'm not really sure why, but anyway, I'll get onto that. So what I want to talk about first is the gameplay. And the gameplay remains relatively unchanged throughout most of the game. So you end up having just, wandering around and doing all that stuff with the torch, and you still find things like bandages and batteries, and you still find name tags and stuff like that. Not much of that changes very much at all, and that's kind of disappointing. I was hoping for something a little bit more intense, maybe, like in the later chapters, because here we go with the Blood Drive spoilers. In the later chapters, the environment changes somewhat, all the walls go bloody, and there's just a whole different feeling to the whole place, because the Book of Shadows has decided to try and take over, or they've gotten like a fake Book of Shadows out of something, or I can't remember exactly how it works, but nevertheless, that whole thing's resolved in like a chapter, but the environment doesn't change back to what it was. But anyway, so it's just a little bit disappointing that they didn't actually change it up, because I thought that Corpse Party actually worked really well, in a sense. Like, the gameplay was very, like, not lighthearted as much as, just thin on the ground, I think is the word I'm looking for. It was very thin on the ground. You would only die, like, from very specific obstacles, but that's what gave the game its charm. It didn't feel like you could just get killed by some random phantom out of nowhere, and then you've got all these random phantoms that chase you around in Blood Drive, and all those things on the floor you can run across, which I really don't see the point of. It's just, they're just strange. Like, they're just there to make it more of a pain in the ass for you, because if they didn't have that stupid, like, torch mechanic, where you have to light up the ground to see what's in front of you, they probably wouldn't even really need to do that whole stuff on the floor mechanic, and they probably wouldn't even need the health bars, and they could just go back to having the phantom system kill you. But considering there's no actual interesting phantoms after all, it just I'll just move on. I'll get onto that. So there are a couple of glitches that I found, and these are different. Like I did say before in my previous video, that the flashlight doesn't work. Like, the endless flashlight simply doesn't work properly, and I don't understand why. It never worked properly for me. No matter what I did, I would end up having just things like... I'd end up just having the batteries just die on me constantly, so I ended up just turning it off half the time, and yeah, that was one glitch. Another glitch was, whenever I entered a specific room in a specific chapter, I can't remember exactly which one it was, a phantom would fall down from the top of the screen over the course of a couple of frames, so you could barely see him fall, then he'd just disappear, and that was it. I don't even know what caused that. That was just freaking strange. Like, damn thing got airdropped on me, and then it just went poof. It didn't flash like it'd been hit by a talisman or anything, but yeah, that was a little bit strange. Actually, I'm kind of surprised. Like, it was either Chapter 8 or Chapter 9. I can't remember which one specifically, but one of those chapters actually rewards you for extinguishing every phantom, but the problem is the phantoms come back if you save your game. So if you save your game and then reload it and then go back to another room, you'll have the phantoms again. So you'll have to either do it all in one shot or have a very good memory. Also, I'm surprised that doesn't actually give you like an alternate ending. Like, that seems like something they could really give you an alternate ending on, but they just don't for some reason. Like, clearing all the ghosts off on the floor has some sort of like effect where they all come back and eat your ass or something. That sounds dirtier than I thought, but nevertheless, there was another thing though. There are a couple of sections in the game where you have to run from these gigantic guys that are wielding these axes, and they shove a couple of more of them into the game. And the thing is, these guys make no fucking sense. Like, even with the expanded context of the ending in there, which I did actually watch, because, you know, I did finish the bloody game, come on, give me a little bit of credit. They don't mean anything. They don't show up in the ending. They're literally just new monsters that have absolutely no justification for being there. There's the anatomical model, which shows up after it's somewhat a special inclusion in Blood Drive, not Blood Drive, Corpse Party, Blood Covered. It's a bit weird. They called one Blood Covered, they called 2 Book of Shadows, and they called 3 Blood Drive. Why didn't they just call number 2 Blood Reparations or something? I don't know. But nevertheless, when you get chased around by these guys, the third time you encounter them, I think it is, it plays dubstep in the background. I'm not even kidding. It's literally a dubstep remix of one of the Corpse Party tracks. Fucking dubstep? I mean, if you want to pull me out of your atmosphere, dubstep is the best way to do it, unless I'm flying around inside a fucking CPU. A fucking dubstep track. I have no idea. It's the most random thing. Like, I can understand an electronic remix of a Corpse Party song, right? You know, you stick it as a bonus track on one of the CDs or something. But putting it in the game when you're being faced by arguably the deadliest enemies in the game is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I'm amazed. The things can't kill you in one shot, but they will take off most of your health bar in one hit. So if you've like tripped on something twice, that's it, you're dead. You'll be dead in one shot anyway. They take off that much health. But yeah, it's just like, they play a dubstep track! And the worst thing is, it only does it in the room with those guys. So you wander into the room, and then you run for the door, and you just hear like 4 or 5 seconds of dubstep, and then the music goes back to normal. And that's the only place in the game where it shows up. Like, there's another place further on in the game where they have another few of those axe guys, but it just doesn't play it there. I'm amazed. I better move on. I can't spend too long dwelling on this, otherwise this video is going to be an hour long. There's also some really random gameplay changes, like the boss fight, which I'll get onto, which is completely different from anything we've seen in Corpse Party before. And there's this one scene that, for the life of me, I can't figure out why they didn't just make this an automatic thing. Like, there's this one scene where you get tackled by this random girl who shows up, which I'm kind of surprised by, because they give her just like one throwaway line later on from one of the asshole characters, and then it's just like, done. And all you have to do to get this girl off you is rapidly tap X. And if you don't do that for 15 seconds, you immediately get a wrong end screen. It's just, why? It's literally just, if you sit there for 15 seconds, do nothing, it's probably shorter than that, it's more like 10. But if you sit there for 10 seconds and do nothing, it just literally goes immediately to a wrong end screen. You don't get a sound effect of you choking or anything. It's just odd. It really is. I don't understand why. Like, they're missing so many good opportunities for CG endings. Like, there's this one ending in the 8th or 9th chapter where you crawl through a hole and you get hung, well, not so much hung, but stabbed, completely destroyed by a bunch of, what's the word I'm looking for? By a bunch of villagers from 300-something years ago that speak Latin, which is kind of amazing. But they just don't give you a CG for it. There are so many, like there are two CGs, right, which show up in the main story, which are actually really good horror-based CGs. Which is like, the first one is when Ayumi stabs herself in the stomach in Chapter 8 to get the Book of Shadows out of her. That was a good CG. That was meant to be unsettling, and that was fucking unsettling. There's also another CG later on where, after the final boss fight, I'm going to stop from here because I'll explain that CG later because it was pretty fucking freaky. Because, you know, I mean, obviously I said earlier on that I'm going to spoil all 3 games, so if you're listening to this point, well, you've heard like half the story already, but nonetheless, yeah, there's another CG later on which really freaks me out, but none of the wrong endings. Like, I did most of the wrong endings, and for the life of me, I didn't like any of the bad endings, except for like 2 of them. None of them were just freaky or didn't have any sort of good visual imagery in the slightest. Like, I went and had a look at the Corpse Party and the Corpse Party Book of Shadows wikis, because I'm like, there's no fucking way that I remember these endings having like CG in them. Turns out they all have CG in them. Like, almost all of them have at least 1 or 2 unique CG images, which is the still images that are like purposefully drawn for that scene of the game, right? So you end up having these bloody things where you look at them and they're freaky and they really lend to the scene, but none of the other endings have them. Next to none of them have them. It's absolutely ridiculous how few of these endings have them. And admittedly, the only ending I did like in Chapter 9 and 10 was the one ending that actually went to the effort of portraying something unique, but I'll get on to that. There are some other story bits that I want to get through, though. Kishinuma, aka Yoshiki, aka the blonde-haired guy. He gets his ass handed to him, and it doesn't feel right. He's meant to be the strong-armed, big brute guy of the group. More or less. I mean, sure, he's got a heart of gold in him, but he's meant to be a big brute. He gets his ass handed to him so many times in this game. Like, he has to end up groping on a girl's boobs in one of the earlier chapters in order to get back to the bloody heavenly host Nirvana, and then he ends up, like, getting the shit kicked out of him several times, including by the anatomical model, including by a tiny-ass girl, which he has to actively shake off. It's just, why? He's supposed to be better than this. But then again, Kishinuma didn't get off so bad, all things considered. Although when we get onto the ending, that might be a different story. Satoshi, the main character of Corpse Party. Like, he's like number 1. He's the guy you spend the most time with. And to be fair, I actually quite like his character. You could take him out of the story entirely, and he would have basically nothing to do with it. Like, you could take him out of the story entirely, and nothing would change. Like, you'd still have Miss Kuon sacrificing herself at the end. Giant spoiler there. You'd still have, you could still, like, kidnap Yuka by saying by lying to her and saying that Satoshi went back to Heavenly Host. And he really does nothing for the entire rest of the game. It's weird, like, how little he actually does. And he just serves as, like, a piggyback ride for Naomi. And it's just, it's weird. It's fucking weird. I don't understand why he has such a little role in this. The entire story feels really, really strange. It feels like it was really, really rushed. And they really struggled to get it out there. I don't know if they had the same writers as they did as Corpse Party, but I'm going to say they didn't. And I have a fair few more reasons for this. For one, the 2 arseholes that get introduced. Like, I can't remember their exact names. I think it's Mitsuo and the girl who's like a somewhat gothic Lolita tsundere scythe-wielding asshole. They're both assholes. Like, they're both the most repugnant characters in the entirety of the series. They're both in the Heavenly Host Nirvana for their own ends. They're both freshly introduced here. They're both have their own, like, character stories basically just grafted onto someone who wasn't there before. Well, who was there before, I should say, sorry. And I don't understand why they're there, because they have, like, zero character development between them until like they're very, very close to death or have zero part in the story anymore. So for example, Mitsuo, the guy in the hoodie who gives Ayumi the mission to assemble the Nirvana's power crystals. That sounds fucking that sounds like a Crash Bandicoot plot. The idea that what happens to him is that we don't learn a thing about him except that he's an asshole until like the last 10 minutes of the game where he's alive. Then he spits out his entire motivation in one go, which is he wants to curb the world so that, honestly, I can't even remember. It's just an asshole bit of a plot. And then, get this. You unlock an extra chapter at the very end of the game. Well, not the very end of the game, I should say, like the very end of that chapter. And you go into it. Actually, no, hang on. I've got my thing mixed up. So after his confession, in about the course of a minute, roughly, he walks down some stairs, and then he gets his head bitten off by the crazy corpse of a girl he tried to kill while he was in there. And he has the Book of Shadows stolen from him because he took from Ayumi. And that's it. He's just dead, right? He just dies right there. He doesn't get any say in the matter, despite the fact he's surprisingly good with a bloody umbrella sword. He just gets his head bitten off by something he doesn't see coming, which is a little bit disappointing, honestly. I mean, despite the fact that I think the guy's an arsehole character and didn't really add anything to the story that was worthwhile, at least he should have gone out with a fight, but whatever. So after that, you unlock an EX chapter, and this EX chapter lasts for about 5 minutes, and it tries to justify his character. How does it do this? Now, I'm not a social justice warrior. I imagine people are gonna come up with problems and things like that, because I just think this is a really, really sloppy story move in any sense. If the sex is reversed, I would say the same thing. If it was a different situation altogether, like someone else, it had happened to someone else, like it happened to Ayumi, I would still say the same thing. But so Ayumi's sister was originally both the mentor and the lover of Mitsuo, which is a really, really weird combination. A weird thing to have. But then her sister gets raped, apparently. That's what I took from the story. It's probably that case. And I imagine that some SJW is going to get pissed off over that. But nonetheless, we'll continue. So she gets raped, and then they break up. I'm not entirely sure what happened, because I read the thing and it was like they broke up because they had different morals or something, and then it immediately pops back to his disembodied his headless body lying in the halls of Heavenly Host, and then the extra chapter ends. And it feels like a really, really sloppy way to try and give his character some, what's the word I'm looking for? Give the character some sort of like dramatic way. Like, they swung the asshole pendulum so far in one direction, they realized they made a mistake, and then they overcorrected on the way back into the nice guy territory, and ended up just, like, making it look stupid on both ends. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's just a really stupid thing. And then you've got this bitch with the scythe, who admits she's in it for her own purposes, until the world starts going to shit, and then she flips sides faster than you can flip a coin. And it's just, she has absolutely no ambition left just because the fucking apocalypse starts. And it's like, why? Like, why would the apocalypse change you from wanting to take over the world? I really don't understand. And then for some reason, the extra chapter, like extra chapter 8, shows her going back to her original cult, and starting to build it up again, which I don't really understand. It has like no relevance to the story whatsoever. And then I realized that they actually plan on continuing this into Corpse Party 2, which is called Dead Patient. It hasn't been announced for Vita or anything like that. It's a PC game made by the same team who made the original Corpse Party. But one of the voice testimonies, the main actor specifically, the person who voices Ayumi, has Corpse Party 2. She actively says Corpse Party 2 is in the works. So I imagine that they're going to be bringing Ayumi back. Not only that, but they're going to be doing like professional voice acting. They're going to get Team Gris in on it, which I'm kind of concerned by. But nevertheless, let's get on to chapters 9 and 10, because chapters 9 and 10 are some of the most ridiculous things. I just got a list of complaints about this chapter, and then down the bottom, I've got 2 points that I liked about them. But anyway, let's get on to this real quick. Hanging puzzle. So, there is a hanging puzzle in the game where you've got these two guys. There's these three guys hanging on a wall, sorry. And these three guys are... There's this little cipher on the floor that says 4 random numbers and then Noble Lot, which I don't really understand. Then, later on, when you're going to get the tools you need to cut these people down, which is really, really up... It's weird, like... Let me put this in perspective. So you cut down the right bodies and a door unlocks, which really doesn't make any sense. But anyway, it's another artificial gameplay extension. They did a lot of those in this game. Like, they did like 3 of them, but nevertheless. So you've got the... Yeah, you've got the 3 hanging bodies there, and then you come across a chalkboard that has a drawing of the 3 people. You've got a... What's the word? You've got a king, a knight, and a commoner. And if you cut down the guy on the left at any time, it's an immediate game over. I'm not entirely sure how, instead of associating with Noble Lot to King, and then not cutting down the King, you end up with that puzzle solution. Like, even when I knew the answer, I still couldn't figure it out, because I was using a walkthrough by that point. And I just don't get it. Stupid puzzle. But I'm sure someone will explain it to me, because, you know, I'm an idiot, but... Then again, there is an even worse thing later on, which I will get to. Then there was that whole point about love stopping time. Oh boy. Miss Kuon, as I already said earlier, sacrifices herself because apparently she did a ton of spell work, which gave her body like something like 20-something years to live from her birth. But at the same time, she got all these amazing little skills and talents and all that. So she sacrifices herself at the very end to not only defeat Sachi in the most anticlimactic thing that I've seen in this bloody series, to throwing a baby tooth at the most powerful thing in the universe at this point and somehow destroying it. I don't understand. I really don't. It's just... But after this is even more strange. Time stops. Satoshi wakes up in a white universe where Ms. Kuon manages to talk to him for a couple of minutes, and then immediately dies. What's the excuse for this in the plot? She thought about it so hard that it ended up stopping time and letting her have some last words to him. The soppiest thing I could imagine ever being in a Corpse Party game is the thing they used to justify a 2-minute scene, which really didn't add anything to the plot. I don't even know. There's another stupid puzzle too. So, it's actually a really sweet scene overall, admittedly, but the choices you get are actually really stupid. Like, so Ayumi walks up to Aiko getting choked to death by the third guy they brought in with them, which is Sayaka's boyfriend, whose name I can't remember, who's been completely taken over by the Darkening and about to kill Aiko. You're given a choice. Kill him or save him. Neither of which make any difference, by the way, except one of them leads you to a wrong end. But the thing is, for some reason, the same text, the same voice clips, play for about the first minute. And then the story branches depending on what you did, what you chose to do. Not what you did, what you chose to do. Because you've done exactly nothing different has happened by this point. If you pick to kill him, well, Aiko's head gets bitten off. But if you pick to save him, at that exact point, it's exactly the same point no matter whether or not you picked it. Only on the route where you pick to save him, Sayaka wanders in, manages to pacify his spirit, and they both go up to heaven. It's really, really freaking weird. It's just... There's no indication that you've done something wrong. Except for the fact that you get a wrong end, obviously. Because the wrong ends in this game are actually really disappointing, because most of them don't actually go anywhere unique. There's only a couple of those, and even then, you don't have to, like, really go to any effort to unlock them. There's no extra ends. There's no really special ends, like in Corpse Party, the one that led to Book of Shadows, you know. There's none of that interesting stuff in there. It's just wrong ends where you make, like, one wrong decision, right? So, you know, it's always disappointing. But it's just... That's a really, really weird example that I wanted to bring up specifically because it only matters on what you've done, not what happens in the story. Just a random arbitrary choice that has had no effect on the story yet. And then I can't explain without actually showing it. I'm not going to show it. So then we get down to the basement in Chapter 9. You have swinging axes. And these swinging axes are really fucking annoying because they are instant kill. And you actively have to dodge them. They're not hard, not by any means, but they are very annoying, and I did die to them twice, right? Because one time I got the timing wrong because I was feeling tired. The second time I got it wrong because I tried to run through a place where it looked like there was nothing on the floor, but it turns out there was something on the floor, and my head got cut off. But nevertheless, the problem that I have with this scene, except for the basement being kind of arbitrary with what decides to kill you, like running into some black fog, and having this weird maze that you have to run through when the walls are coming in on you. Those are okay. They look kind of retarded because of the 3D presentation of the whole thing, but they're okay. It's kind of obvious that you're not supposed to walk into those. Kinda. Sorta. But it's just... With these swinging axes, there's a save candle before you go to them. And there's a few save candles in between them as well. So, you know... It isn't that big of a deal. The problem is the first candle is bloody invisible. They put you in the room just far enough ahead that not only do you not see the door that you have to go into, you don't see the save candle. And there's even a cutscene that shows you, like, where that part of the area is, but the save candle is blocked by a fucking table. So you don't see the save candle that you can backtrack to. It's a minor thing, but in this game where there are so many minor mistakes, you just have to pick on all of them. Nevertheless, yeah, it's just it's annoying because you don't see it. You just don't see it. But nevertheless, we move on to Chapter 10. Chapter 10 makes a tiny bit more sense for the very first few minutes. There is... Actually, I'll leave the good parts until later. No cutscene skipping really screws this chapter up, by the way. You can't skip cutscenes, you just have to hold R, and it takes a couple of minutes for it to go through, which is really, really annoying. I really wish they'd implemented that. But, nevertheless... There's one room in Chapter 10 which makes absolutely no fucking sense. It's this Crystal Maze. It's Crystal Maze room, I should say. The maze can be trawled through in about 10 seconds on your first try. And there are some... It's weird. Like, it's a really, really easy maze to get through, but it's all covered in this crystal stuff, so it's sort of kind of hard to see the walls. But it's still easy to get through in about 10 seconds, and then you immediately get a save candle afterwards. And there are 3 of these, like, axe guys in the maze, but the AI is so dumb that it's really easy to just route them all onto the one path and then go behind them. And then that's it. It's just a tiny maze that takes 10 seconds and has 0 point of being there, except to be another arbitrary gameplay obstacle, and then it's the door to the final boss fight. Boy! This is going to be a tough one, but... Fuck, I'm happy I had a guide for this, because this would have infuriated me to no end. But nevertheless, so you've gone through the maze, you've saved, you've gone into this weird dimension thing with a bunch of floorboards, and there's a, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a big heart that is representative of the Nirvana, and then there's the flying witch in the sky that you have to go and beat the crap out of with some help from some pages you're supposed to find in the library earlier on in the chapter. The chapter is actually really short, by the way. Like, really, really, really short. So, it's not that hard to find them if you go wandering around a bit. But nevertheless, the pages have these sort of weird letterings on them, which I really don't understand. They call it, I can't remember exactly what they called them, but the name reminded me of the developer Fat Shark for some reason. I read Fat Shark every time I saw the name, so I don't know. The idea is, you have these 10 words that show up on these 5 pages, and when you go into this boss fight, which is like witch versus witch, you end up having to throw back the specific word at the witch that she says. You have to throw back a specific counter word to her word. Which, for one, isn't very corpse party at all, but nevertheless. And two, it's surprisingly difficult to figure out which words go with which. You have 5 pages that you can find in the game that have a total of 10 words. And despite the fact that every page has 2 words on it, they aren't the 2 words that go together. So you have to pick the 2 words that go together randomly. As far as I'm aware, there is no way to determine what words go with what counter words without trial and error. So you end up just having to fondle. You end up having to just fiddle. What's the word I'm looking for? Stumble your way through this boss fight, trying to figure out what goes with what. I didn't bother to do that, obviously. When one of the words would come up, I'd hit the home button on my thing, check the guide, because it thankfully had a picture of what words went with what, and then I went back to the game and I hit the right thing. Do that 5 times and the game's over. I'm not even kidding. It's just, it's not even that dramatic a scene because it comes out of bloody nowhere. You go from somewhat creepy Heavenly Host replacement to Crystal Maze Room to room with random floorboards and heart and random shit. Just whatever. It's not even that climactic because it's so fucking random. It's like the curves of bloody sine wave at this point. And then they reveal the big twist, which is it wasn't Sachiko, Yoshi, or whatever after all. It was some bloody witches who got burned over 300 years ago at the stake, and which is obviously not... You could figure this out like 2 or 3 chapters earlier if you weren't retarded. And they created the Book of Shadows, and the Book of Shadows couldn't be controlled, so it was passed down through the bloody Shinozaki line for generations, blah, 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 blah. That was already covered. So, it's just... It's a weird ending to the game, honestly, because honestly, it is kind of creepy because the witch makes you go through the pain that she went through by pulling out your eye, which is really quite gross. But they do also have this weird fan servicey scene, which isn't really that fan servicey, but it's weird. It's like a lesbian kiss between Ayumi and the witch, which doesn't make any bloody sense to me. Like, why did you need to do that? I don't understand. Like, there was never any kissing in Corpse Party before. Why exactly did it happen now? But they end up kissing for a little bit, and then she goes back and she decides to take all of the what's the word? The Nirvana into her, like Sachiko did, and, just try and keep the curse going for a few more years. Because, that's the only way they can do it. And for that, she takes the burden upon herself, because Amy can only do it alone. So everyone else leaves. And then Yoshiki turns around and runs back in after her, because he's an idiot, and everybody else decides to leave instead. So the idea is that despite the fact that, what's her name? Psycho, Miss Yui, Mayu, and Moroshige are all dead. Despite the fact they're all dead and they can't come back, because despite the fact that Mizuta was an arsehole and told her they could come back, well, they couldn't. They still get revived, but they're still dead. So the thing is, their memories return to the world, but they don't remember. They're still dead. Like, they died of something. I'll be damned to find out what they died of, because unless that's in another one of the voice actors' the testimonies, they don't tell you what they actually died of, which is weird. But they did say something along the lines of a CEO went missing all of a sudden, and they're trying to figure out what happened to him. So I'm going to imagine it's just like something got implanted. But whatever, that's not the biggest problem with the ending. At first, I thought they stuck their morals. Like, because there's this photo that comes up that shows all of the old victims' faces undarkening. But then it shows the left side of the photo with Yoshiki and Ayumi, and they disappear entirely. They're just gone, right? And here I am thinking they're going to stick with their morals, because as much as Corpse Party's story was a sad end because 4 of the people didn't actually make it out of there, it was a really good ending because it was like, you know, they played with fire and they suffered the consequences. And I thought, well, Ayumi's gone and Thingo's gone, Yoshiki's gone. So, you know, good ending because it's all sad, right? You know, they fucked up. They played with shit they shouldn't have. And they got something back, but in return, they lost 2 of their other people. Except they didn't. Last couple of minutes of the story, it reveals that both Ayumi and Yoshiki are still alive, and not only that, they actually know each other. So nothing was gained, except for the fact that Ayumi went a little nuts and actually got some character development in there. Most disappointing thing about the entire ending. They shouldn't be alive. No one should remember them. They gave themselves up to save the world. They shouldn't be remembered. And yet, they got away with it. They were karma Houdinis, to put it that way. And I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. It's just... It honestly just feels like they all just got out of some really bad danger for no bloody reason. And the extra chapters don't do anything for that either. Like, you do all the extra chapters 1 through 6, which are kind of irrelevant to the main plot, like most of them are anyway. And it feels like one of the reasons to have one of the extra chapters was to get Tomokazu Sugita in there for 5 minutes extra, because I swear to Christ I don't know that man's name, I just can't remember what it's from. But nevertheless, you beat all 6 of them and get an extra, the 7th chapter, which is like, you know, the Scythe bitch ends up rebuilding a clan, but yeah. I'm just so thoroughly disappointed at how that ending turned out. Because it shouldn't have ended that way. They should be gone. They really should be. It just doesn't feel right. Honestly, something's not right about this ending. I feel it in my gut. It's just dumb. Really dumb. And I know I don't have a very good reason for them, like not getting their asses handed to them and basically being forgotten. But at the same time, they shouldn't have lived through that. Nobody should have lived through that. But apparently they did. Now, to end off this criticism, if you could call it that, I have 2 things that I want to talk about that I actually liked. Just to show you that not only did I actually like some parts of this game, but something was massively, massively wrong with the rest of it. Because just how fucking strange it was. Alright, nevertheless. Now, Naomi should have been the one to see this scene that I'm talking about coming up ahead, because it's got Psycho in it, and considering those 2 were like the lesbian shipping couple, they really should have been the ones together to see this. But anyway, Ayumi, at least I'm pretty sure it was Psycho, because, you know, Shinohara is Psycho's last name, but nevertheless. So, Ayumi comes across an Ouija board, and the Ouija board starts talking with in Psycho's voice. And Psycho just gives a heartfelt goodbye. That's basically all she does. They've accepted she's never coming back at this point. And there's this somewhat sweet scene where they come back to help her in the boss fight, but it really doesn't mean anything because they don't really like say anything or anything, so it could be any random force spirits, but nevertheless, it was a really downtrodden scene, and just like, it was well paced, and it was just a little bit of conversation where it was just, I liked it because it was so simplistic, and it was just a simple way to say goodbye to at least one of the characters. I would have liked it if all 4 of them got an ending like that. Like Sayaka, with her ending, with taking the other guy basically up into the clouds and all that. I would have liked it if it was an ending, if there was an ending like that for all of them, but apparently only Psycho gets it, and even then she only gets through on a Ouija board. It was a really, really nice scene. It was a really good scene, and I wish there was more of them, except there really isn't. You don't get any closure for any of the other characters that died, despite the fact that their spirits are still wandering around somewhere. And you don't get any closure for Miss Yui either, which is really, really weird. Like, they bring her up several times in relation to not Miss Mayu. God, I can't even remember her name now. But nevertheless, they bring her up so many times, yet she gets 0 closure whatsoever. It's so weird. They bring her up like 10 times, and then nothing. Feels like it was building up to something, and then it just doesn't. I swear the entire game feels like it was being built, and then they ran out of money. So they just had to wrap everything up as quickly as possible. It's really disappointing, honestly. I really wish they just stuck with like the two-dimensional like gameplay style, because not only would they have not spent so much of their budget on the bloody graphics, maybe they would have been able to do something with the sound, because the sound still fucking sucks. There is something else I do like though, and it was one of the boss endings. On the final boss, I should say. So the final boss has like 3 or 4 different endings depending on how many hits you take. Actually, no, let me try this again. She has 3 different endings. The first one, your head gets blown off. That's it. Like, your 3D model's just floating there in space, then your head goes boom, but the whole game freezes for a couple of seconds. So it's like, it has 0 effect, because your head's there, and then it's just gone, and then there's just a blood splatter on the screen. There's no flying blood or anything, it's just, yeah, that, and then it's just wrong end immediately, and you have to play the whole thing again. The second one happens if you fail again, at least as far as I'm aware. And it has you floating up towards heaven, first off. And this is a good ending, by the way. This is the ending I actually really like. She floats up, then it cuts to another scene. You see black for about a quarter of a second, and then it cuts to a schoolroom, where Ayumi's standing there, and she's talking to the spirits of Mayu, Psycho, Miss Yui, and Morishige. Except Morishige doesn't really say a word in this scene, which is really weird. You do get to see Miss Yui one more time in this, but it's not a good way. So, after about a minute of lighthearted, peppy conversation, the scene fades to black again, and it turns out it's just Ayumi standing in the abyss, talking to the 4 bodies of her classmates and teacher. And she's gone completely and utterly fucking insane. While this ending makes no sense in the fact that you have to go through the same thing twice for 2 different results, which is really, really fucking weird, I actually still really liked it, because it was really fucking creepy. It was really, really creepy. Admittedly, that's one of the best endings in the entire game, just because it was so unsettling to see you standing around those 4 school friends and just being stuck in the black abyss forever. It was really, really, really spine-tingling. And there's just not enough of those endings in the game. There really, really isn't. But those are the 2 parts of the game that I really liked. But after that second ending, there's a third one. And I actively turned the game back on after I beat it to get this ending, because you have to be very, very specific about this. So, at the very end of the game, you have everyone who's still alive that's on your side, including the scythe bitch, down on the bottom floor where they can't reach you. Down on the bottom floor where they can't reach you when you're about to go do the final battle. This includes Satsuki, who's a very new character to the series, who has been proven to be a completely crazy, psycho, bloody monster at this point, whose head splits open in 8 fucking directions and chomps people's heads off. You probably know what's coming, but nevertheless. So, you go up, and the condition to get this ending is to take 4 hits, then win the boss fight. Which really doesn't make any sense. I don't know how this happens. But nevertheless, if you take 4 hits and then you win the boss fight. So I'm going to take this to mean you spent too long on the boss fight, and then the following happens. So, you go through the whole scene with the witch biting your, taking your eye out, and then giving you a weird bit of a makeout session, then you come back. And you've got the girl with the head split open in 8 directions standing there. She's covered in blood. There's a huge blood stain on the ground. Everyone else is missing for some bloody reason. And then you come across the scythe girl, who's the bottom half of her body is completely missing, and she tells you to watch out. You turn around and you immediately get your head bitten off. No cool CG with all the bodies lying there. No cool CG, at least, of the scythe girl having her bottom half bitten off, which I would have liked to have seen purely because I think that girl was a bitch and I would have liked to have seen her dead. And there's absolutely no justification for this ending actually happening, other than the sorta, kinda impression that you took too long on the boss fight and the girl woke up and ate everyone while you weren't paying attention. And that's the ending. Like, I was hoping there was going to be something even better. Like, God, I don't know what could potentially be better. But, like, having the spirits of Mayu and Miss Yui and Seiko or whatever go mad because they failed to you threw them away or something like that, and they just went mad because, you know, it's a fucking corpse party game. Give me a break. But I just thought it might have been something crazy like that, but it wasn't. And with that ending, all my goodwill for this game just went out the window. I thought it had managed to redeem itself. I thought it had managed to actually have some interesting endings going on. Despite the fact it was still kind of nuts, but it just didn't. It just didn't. I would rather pretend Blood Drive never existed. I would rather pretend that Book of Shadows never had a last chapter. Which, for me, was actually really good, because I finished Book of Shadows without importing my Corpse Party save, so the final chapter never unlocked for me. So, yeah, I'm just going to pretend the Blood Drive never existed, because Blood Drive is a slog. Blood Drive is a series of really, really bad decisions for the story. Blood Drive is weirdly unbalanced as to what the original meaning of the series was. Blood Drive was meaningless, repetitive gameplay. Blood Drive was stupid puzzles. Blood Drive was stupid endings. Blood Drive was, in the attempt of taking steps forward for the series, its leg coils around backwards like a fucking spinning wheel and boots itself up the arse. The only good things I can say happened in it are Ayumi got some character development, the Ouija board ending, which brought an end to the bloody... I just smacked myself really hard in the knee. The Ouija board discussion, and that one little boss ending there. That's it. That's the only thing I liked about Corpse Party Blood Drive. That's the only thing. It's just... it fails at being a Corpse Party game. That's my biggest problem with it. It doesn't know what made Corpse Party great. Corpse Party built itself around great design of the graphical assets, the CGs, the minimalistic graphic style which made you use your imagination, the sound assets, the sound design, the binaural sound, which was really, really, really well put together, and the usage of very little gameplay that was stupid or repetitive, and really interesting situations. Like, admittedly, there was one part of Corpse Party which everyone didn't like, which was hunting down the talismans in the final chapter. That was stupid, I admit that. Then there was also the, notes in the chapter where if you read them all, you would go fucking insane. Which was a really, really clever idea. Why did they do it for this one? They just had the name tags. There was also the Darkening, which had absolutely no relevance to this game at all, because they changed Darkening from a story element to a gameplay element. And it did fucking nothing except take steps backwards. They changed the Phantoms from instant kill story relevant things to gameplay things, and therefore completely got rid of their relevance and took them a few steps backwards as well. They added dubstep to the music. They had fan service moments in the main story, which just made a sine wave, which really didn't keep the horror going straight. It's not a Corpse Party game. It's like if a fan wrote a Corpse Party story to get some bloody fan service in there. There's bloody 2 CG shots of Satsuki and Yuka, which could have been used to do better bad ends. I've been ranting about this game for a goddamn hour now, and I still feel like I haven't ragged on it enough. I really don't. This game was disappointing on so many levels for me, personally. I was hoping for a really, really, scary, creepy, interesting romp, and all I got was something that I am relentlessly destroying. This has been Blue Maxima, and I'll see you all next time.